Picture this. You are reviewing a case study in class, and one of your students raises their hand and says, I don't want to offend you, but. And you feel how the classroom start getting tense. You feel like things are not going the way you wanted. You start getting nervous. So, what do you do? Welcome to Off Syllabus with Manny, where we talk about the hardest parts of teaching, the ones that never make it to the syllabus. Today, we are talking about how to guide tough conversations with empathy and structure. Today, joining me is Rachel Piontak, who spends a lot of time working with faculty and campus leaders across the nation on how to create spaces to support civil discourse. So, we're going to explore how to build facilitator skills to help you navigate this conversation. So, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Rachel, ready for the questions?
I was born ready, Manny.
Perfect. Okay, so question number one. I heard that tough conversations are hard. Who would have thought, right? What do you think is the hardest part of facilitating tough conversations?
Okay, love this question. And while obviously it's not a universal answer, I can definitely speak for myself and the feedback that I've gotten from working with faculty over the years that the hardest part is managing the emotional temperature in the room when there's hot moments, when emotions run high. How do you ensure that there's still learning happening and that students are able to wrestle through and with their discomfort without kind of our default steering back to more safe and superficial comments.
So you're
I would
basically
say more than
saying,
that's the hardest.
okay, so I feel like you're saying that you jump into the fire and then you keep running through the fire and you're not putting it out. So is that
Yeah, I love a good fire metaphor. But I do think there's this worry, and it's not unfounded, but that if you go down this path of having these tough conversations with students, that there will be harm caused, that there will be a loss of control, classroom management, but also just emotions, or that you'll be seen as biased depending on what type of conversations you shut down or encourage. So I think the temptation then is instead of going into the fire at all, is to stay very far away from the fire and say, we're not going to talk about that, or I'm going to put such rigid controls over this conversation that we're never actually going to warm our hands on the topic.
Yeah, and I love that because it's like, so you you want to be in the fire, but you don't really want the students to get burned. So I don't think we are saying that things you let things escalate because I don't think we want to escalate, but we want to make sure like that temperature is in a way that is manageable and it's not too easy that we are not pushing students to think outside the box, but it's actually pushing them a little. So it's not, is there's that sweet balance.
Yeah, and this kind of gesture and that balance is really it's tension and it's naming how do we how do we find that space between discomfort and too far, like safety, too far discomfort. And part of that is by having a plan. I mean, learning how to tolerate discomfort, but also having a plan for where that line is. And that includes naming what's happening, but also pausing and defaulting to those, not defaulting, but engaging those agreed upon group agreements or classroom norms or what have you, which if you haven't heard, it's an earlier episode. And going
Listen
back
to
to
it.
those, there we go, to say remember, this is what we agreed to, let's recalibrate here. So it's part of flexibility and having a plan.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the imagine this at the beginning. We talk about how like a student just stands up or raises their hand and they share something that sort of puts maybe the students, but also maybe the faculty in like a difficult spot. And I feel like in this scenario, maybe the faculty is feeling uncomfortable and also the students are feeling uncomfortable. So I want to talk about from my experience. If something like that happened, which happened to me, even though I was teaching chemistry, there are moments that were uncomfortable for different situations. And I always struggle to figure out if I should take care of myself first or I should take or if I should take care of my students first. Because I don't know, I never quite figure out what was the right thing to do. So for somebody like me, what type of feedback do you have about that?
First, I would just say, dude, it's tough. Like it's and it depends on the situation because there are going to be, say this to go back to that example, the student's like, I don't want to say anything thing offensive, but, and then they say something that's super offensive to a core piece of your identity, like it is, whether or not they meant it to be personal, it is personal. And that is a different matter than saying something more broadly, something that isn't directed at anyone specifically in the room. Can you ever know that? No. But as far as taking care of yourself versus the students, I think it's a both and because by taking care of yourself, you are better able to then care for that learning environment. So in an event that the student says something that is attacking those core identities of who you are. Say you're a religious person and they're attacking your religion that is very near and dear and important to you. Of course, rather than lash out, this is an opportunity to say, "Hey, okay, it sounds like we have some strong feelings about this.
Mhm.
So name it." And then take a pause. Say, in order for us to really gather our thoughts and maybe develop some, if you're gonna go down that route, obviously, like keep it content specific. But if you opt to go into that tough conversation mode, take a pause first, invite folks to write for 60 seconds, 2 minutes. What is their response to this? What follow-up questions do they have based on this comment? And while they're doing that, that's when you assess yourself. Like, give yourself the time that you need in order to figure out, how am I today? Yeah, and some of that is truly, how did I sleep last night? Was I up all night with my kids? Am I already on edge? Am I deeply undercaffeinated? Like, you might not be in a good headspace to do that today. So parking lot it. When we come back together, say, listen, I think this is a conversation that someone really wants to have. Maybe as a class we can talk about it more deeply, but I need to think through the best way to do that, and I can't do that in today's class. So we're going to talk about it next week. So give yourself permission to parking lot those hot topics. But a lot of that comes with knowing your own level and your own capacity at that moment too.
Yeah, and I also like the idea of having some sort of assignment because sometimes I feel that I might not want to put myself in a vulnerable spot in front of people. So telling people we will discuss that will put me in a place that maybe I feel uncomfortable. But if I said, okay, let's take a break and let's do this activity, I don't put myself in that vulnerable space. And I'm not saying putting myself in that space is good or bad, but it gives people options to decide whether that's the path they want to take or not.
Exactly. And I think to that end, none of this is possible without preparing in advance, preparing for this moment. Like, it's easy for us to be talking here now in like a random Thursday afternoon. This would be a great thing to do in this hot moment. But in reality, when and if that happens, if you don't already have something in your back pocket, then it's not, you're working with the tools that you already have. So by having a plan ahead of time, like a de-escalation toolkit or a parking lot plan, something like that that you can actually put into place when that arises is really valuable.
Yeah, something you mentioned before, I'm gonna like switch gears to maybe like a couple minutes ago. You're talking about having structure and think about how you want to facilitate these conversations. And I'm not an expert any of these things, but I know I heard this from you that you sort of know some things about um, empathy maps and dialogue circles. Can you talk about those strategies and how faculty can use them to help facilitate this type of environment?
Absolutely. And I think that it is not a total jump away from what we were just talking about because these are activities that help build that learning environment and strengthen that learning community to not necessarily mitigate disagreements or hot moments. Those still may arise and could arise, but by going through these exercises of empathy maps or embedding dialogue circles in your classes, that can help students practice those skills preemptively, like practice them and learn along the way so that when we get to this hot comment that's super offensive, everyone's not just, you know, what would this be? Raising their hackles all at once. So one way to do this, again, I say this in every time that we talk, is I know that they need to be adapted to your specific course content. So I'm going to try to keep this broad, but my background is teaching student success courses and then a lot of comm. So it's a lot of communication stuff. But empathy maps is just this idea that students are stepping into someone else's shoes, as it were, but they're asking, what might this person or what might this group be seeing, hearing, thinking, or feeling in this particular situation? So there's a lot of great resources and actual empathy maps, which is a document that says, this is the group or the person. What are they thinking, seeing, hearing, feeling, etc. And this is the situation. So an easy one that I've done before with my first year students is a transfer student experience. This is a large state school. So we have a transfer student coming from a tiny community college, and all of a sudden they're in a 300-person auditorium for general chemistry, actually.
Yeah.
Yay! So first day of class, they're one of the few sophomores because most people take it as freshmen. What are they thinking walking into that? What might they be thinking walking into that giant auditorium? What might they be feeling? Are they feeling overwhelmed? This is, the size of their entire class back, or their entire grade back in their previous school. But really going through each of these separately and giving students the space and the time to think about, what might a transfer student be experiencing? What might a single parent who's a student be experiencing? There's numerous examples there, but by really letting empathy become a practice and not just a buzzword, it allows students to better support each other when they do inevitably talk to someone who has a different life experience than them. And then dialogue circles can be either an add-on or a standalone activity to that. So as students complete those empathy maps with the given prompt and the given person or community group, then they're given a broader prompt. Typically, it's in a circle, and that's a little too kumbaya for some folks, but it helps to look at each other, okay? Just practically, it helps. So, yeah, small circles, 6 to 8 students, have them discuss this prompt. What did they imagine someone might see, think, hear, feel about this? Then take it a step further. What would you do if... Here's the context. We've even gone so far as to do the examples of, there is a politically polarizing speaker who has been invited to speak at your campus. Do you? Oh yeah, I know. And so obviously maybe don't leave with that one, but by giving students an opportunity to wrestle with very real issues in an environment that's saying, we're not creating action plans here, but like, what would we do? What might these different entities be seeing, thinking, feeling, believing? Did I get them all? Seeing,
Yeah.
hear, think, feel.
Resources.
Yeah, look at these different, the multiplicity of perspectives here. So I think at one or both of those activities in a classroom that's going to be asked to engage in diverse perspectives, which I would argue nearly every class would fall in an academic at some level.
That's what we are, sale.
Yeah. Anyway, those are my favorites.
So I do have a question about them. So very briefly. So like, what do you think the main purpose or goal of an empathy map will be compared to a dialogue circle?
Yeah. Empathy maps are really about building empathy, understanding how empathy works. Building empathy was enough. I didn't need to expand on that. But really trying to see things from different perspectives, from folks that are coming at the same situation from a different angle. A dialogue circle then is much more about practicing that empathy in action. And the prompt that I gave you was maybe spicier than it needed to be. Because truly, you can have a dialogue circle and ask, what's a cause that you're passionate about? We're going to talk for 20 minutes about this or 10 minutes about this. And I want you like speak from your heart here. And because folks have just come from an exercise where you're being asked intentionally to think beyond yourself, it's a really nice coupling.
Yeah, no, I like this because like it sort of gives the idea that an empathy map is about reflection. It's
Mhm.
about perspective taking. And then you have the dialogue circles that are more about practice. And potentially, going back to some of the other things we talked about before, community building and
Yeah.
thinking about in collaboration to other, in relation to others. So I do like the combination of the two. I know. Everything we do is so connected. Okay,
I love it.
so one more thing I want to ask you is what's one tool you think every facilitator, and I'm gonna take facilitator as a very broad term because like just about every faculty, every time you present, you're facilitating some type of conversation or content
Definitely.
delivery. So what tool do you think every facilitator should have in their back pocket?
I'm going to bring us full circle to the very first part of this podcast to say having a pause protocol is a tool every facilitator should have in their back pocket. When the temperature rises, what can you say? What comes naturally out of your mouth that buys everyone some time to cool? So this can take a variety of forms, but like a de-escalation sentence stem is one example where it's like those thank you cards from our childhood where it's like, dear blank, thank you for the blank. I will use it for blank. It's that sort of thing. But our colleagues over at the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy have some really great resources about this. But it's essentially a simple statement that you pair with an activity. So you could say, so one protocol pause. Let's pause. I'm noticing some heat. Let's take 2 breaths, myself included. And then I'll restate what I'm hearing. So, Manny, it sounds like you're saying that you have a potentially offensive comment or you have a very strong feeling about something that you worry might hurt others' feelings. Um, Now we're going to take a 30 to 60 second right break. Write out what you're thinking about this moment, about whatever was said, whatever the content is. And then we're going to turn to our neighbors, pair share for 30 seconds, and then do a quick debrief as a whole. That whole thing, I'm not doing the math in real time, but it's a couple of minutes long. But just having something like that in your back pocket, it's super basic. Let's pause. I'm sensing heat. Let's take 2 breaths, and then I'll summarize. Great. Now you're giving it then to the students to say, write down your hot take. Write down what you're thinking. 60 seconds, turn to your neighbor. Brief is the key word, pair share. You don't want them going off forever. And then let's come back together and debrief together. So you've really taken a moment that could have caught fire and not thrown, ash? What do you throw on fire to put it out? Water? Anyway, you're not throwing cold water on it, but you're saying, let's investigate this in a way that we can all breathe.
You're asking a chemist, so I was trying to figure out what type of fire you're trying to put out because it
Just like
depends.
a nice, fire with
No,
Chipotle
but
ranches.
what I do like about this is that we can connect this also to community or group agreements because we could build this type of de-escalation tool into the group agreements. And every time we are feeling that the conversations are getting heated, we know that we need to take a minute, a way to write our thoughts down into a paper, some sort of reflection, like 1 minute reflection paper. So maybe all of this actually is going like connecting. So I like this.
Yeah. My communication and conflict professor of 20 years ago would be so proud of this conversation right now.
Good. You're making somebody proud. So that's all that matters. All right. So big thanks to Rachel for sharing her insights on how to bring empathy and structure to tough conversations. For more information and resources about how to navigate and facilitate tough conversations, please check the resources below. Thank you. And remember, Teaching goes way beyond what's on the syllabus.
I've tried. I tried to say it with you.
Yeah, we can try this again. And remember, teaching goes beyond what's on the syllabus.
We'll work on it.
We'll practice. Thank you.